There are some things that have been going on in the beekeeping industry that I would really like to inform you of and help you understand what is actually going on. Because as it stands today, beekeeping is in trouble, starting with honey. This morning I went to my local Kroger and it's been a while since I've actually taken a look at what is on their shelves since as a beekeeper I have plenty of honey to go around. But I've heard many beekeepers complaining about dropping honey prices. Meanwhile, the cost to produce honey is going up drastically. So after receiving this month's issue of the American Bee Journal, I decided it's time to start doing some research. So, what exactly is fake honey? So, fake honey still contains a little bit of honey, but it's not the majority of it. What a lot of other producers are starting to do, particularly honey that's being shipped in from overseas, is they're mixing our honey, real honey, with other corn syrups or rice syrups, cheaper syrups to be able to get that honey to stretch a little bit further. They do this so that they can make that same batch of honey, then make way more money for them because it becomes more profitable since they can make it actually go farther. But the only problem with this is it is now causing a huge problem when it comes to United States beekeepers because we have to compete with the exact same with those prices that the fake honey is coming into United States saying that they're able to take. As it stands today, any testing that we are doing is really not adequate because 90% of the honey that you do see on the grocery store shelves are in fact fake. We have a little bit of testing that is done for any of the honey that does come in, but if they're not really catching any of these corn syrups that are coming through, then clearly we need to have a whole overhaul of what's going on. So, why is fake honey so prevalent to even begin with? Well, first and foremost, to reduce cost and, of course, increase profitability. I came across a post discussing this exact problem amongst commercial beekeepers. At first, I thought the problem was that honey packers were to blame for even bringing the honey in to begin with, which part of this is true, as the requirements for labeling in America have a lot of loopholes. An example being that as long as a honey packing facility is located in the United States, then they can put a made in the USA on their label, even though the honey that is in the bottle is coming from outside countries like Argentina, Spain, China, and India. But because the packer's home base is in America, then they get to use that on their label. Same thing goes for honey that claims to be made in Michigan or made in Texas. They're then able to claim that that honey is local just because their packaging facility address is located in that state. But this isn't the only problem. The next problem is that with fake honey flooding the market and lowering honey prices, suppliers of real American honey can't compete with the prices grocery stores are requiring in order to even get a spot on their shelves. So they take the lowest bidder, and the packer with the lowest price wins the deal. There have been a few packers that have used this tactic just to push out smaller guys so that they can essentially hog the market. They'll repackage the exact same honey in a different bottle with a different label, but it's the exact same honey on the inside just so that they can hog the market and kick anybody else off of those shelves so that they don't have any other competitors right next to them. Okay, so how can we spot the difference of if we are actually buying or consuming fake honey? And you see, now this is actually part of the problem. So if you're familiar with honey and you've been buying honey from a local beekeeper, then you're going to be able to tell if you're eating fake honey or not. But if you're not used to what real honey tastes like, you probably have no idea you're even eating fake honey. You can notice it by it being sweeter. It's going to have a higher sugar content because it has that corn syrup or rice syrup in it. It just has a higher sweetness taste to your palate. And on top of that, it's going to be rather bland. You're not going to have a whole lot of floral sources that are coming out in that honey. It's just going to pretty much taste like syrupy sugar. And that would explain why I've heard some people say they don't like the taste of honey because it's not real honey that they're having even to begin with. And that atypical honey bear taste, whenever you buy those honey bears at Walmart, which are 100% fake, they are not real honey by any means. They have that typical taste of honey. It's like a flavoring. I don't even know how to describe it, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. They will add that just to kind of disguise themselves so that you do think that it is honey. But one other way that you can tell if you are consuming fake honey is it's said that you can put fake honey in some water and if it dissolves right away, that's how you know it's fake. If it's real honey, it will collect and sink to the bottom in a hard ball and then slowly dissolve over time. Okay, so now that we know what fake honey even is and what's going on with that, now we can actually talk about what's actually going on and what is such a big problem in the beekeeping industry and why I need help from people like you to make a change and make a difference in what's going on. So, beekeeping today comes with a lot of upfront cost, and a lot of times, honey sales is the only thing that really beekeepers have to be able to survive on. We have to pay for mite treatments, we have to pay for feeding our hives. All the equipment's not cheap anymore. If you need any heavy equipment like a bobcat, diesel truck, stuff like that to even transport your hives, then that can also get really pricey too. So if honey prices continue to drop due to the fake honey that is coming in at a cheaper price, then a lot of beekeepers will face a loss in their livelihood and a huge loss in income. In fact, a lot of beekeepers are already showing with us today, as I know a couple who have had to go into debt just so they can actually keep their operation going. And remember, all this strain on beekeepers is definitely not a good thing because remember, our food system relies on beekeepers in order to pollinate half of the crops that we're even consuming today. That's not even counting what needs to be pollinated to feed the animals that we consume as well. So beekeepers are a very important thing to have that are healthy and being prosperous in our country. Now, some beekeepers have tried to make a stand and fight against this unfair competition, but business is honestly ruthless. And it's hard to fight against big corporations that monopolize the market. So without any real change in the policies and regulations and labeling and what grocery stores are actually allowing onto their shelves, beekeepers are working pretty much with their hands tied behind their back. But this is why I say that beekeeping is essentially under attack because there are a lot of policies that are trying to go through legislation in order to get passed that's going to make beekeeping way harder for us. One of those being something that Charles Linder, a commercial beekeeper in the Midwest, is currently fighting right now. He has a whole article about it in the American Bee Journal that he's been updating us on in every single month's issue. And what it is, if you don't know about it, is beekeeping right now today is underneath the EPA's regulation for all of our rules and how it functions. And what was supposed to happen this year was they were planning to transfer beekeeping over to the FDA's rule. Well, thankfully, with a lot of work from some other commercial beekeepers and Charles Linder himself, they were able to get it delayed 1 year, but that doesn't mean that we have won yet. There's still a lot that needs to be put forward in order for things to go through properly. So what this would mean if beekeeping transferred over to the FDA instead of the EPA is that we would have to have a veterinary prescription in order to get any of the miticides that we use today on varroa mites. And the reason why this is such a big problem is varroa mites are a pest that have the ability to completely collapse our colonies. And if all of a sudden there's going to be a bunch of red tape in order to get any sort of treatment to be able to manage varroa mites in your colonies, you're going to see a lot of hives start to collapse. And on top of that, there is this scary mite called Tropicales mites. I don't know if you've heard about it yet, but it's a new mite that is over in Asia right now that we are hoping we can find a way to close our borders, close Canada's borders, so that we don't have them come into our landmass, I guess, into North America and start infecting all of our honeybee colonies. We don't have a whole lot of treatments that are in place for Tropicales mites. They are a mite that reproduces in the brood similar to varroa mites, but times 10. They're a lot more difficult to manage from what they've seen so far. Now, the only thing they have found to be able to treat Tropicales mites is formic acid. And that is why if we don't have if we don't have miticides that are easily accessible, we're going to see a lot of problems if that mite does transfer over to North America and start infecting our honeybee colonies. So what Charles Linder is proposing to the EPA is that the EPA still keeps beekeeping under its rule, and that in his new proposal, they would allow us to be able to actually use organic acids like formic acid, oxalic acid, thiamol, any of like the essential oils, stuff like that in our colonies without any veterinary prescription or without having to use a name brand. Right now, we can only use these products if they are labeled underneath a name brand and sold underneath a name brand. We don't have full reign to be able to experiment or try out anything with these products, even though organic acids really pose no threat to man or the environment whatsoever. So he's proposing that we would then be able to use generic versions of it, hence also helping beekeepers save a little bit of money, but also being able to try to experiment and maybe find a better way of treating for varroa mites and maybe tropicales mites if they ever come over here. I pray that they don't. And maybe even be able to fight against some of the viruses that honeybees struggle with today. Okay, so that is not the only thing that's going on in the beekeeping space. So we have honey, we have beekeeping being transferred over to the FDA and causing a whole lot of issues. And now we also have something called GeoCure. If you haven't heard of it, let me explain it to you because, this one definitely makes me aggravated and I'm going to try to contain myself as much as possible. Okay, so GeoCure is this company that is proposing to commercial beekeepers that they will buy out their entire operation for a very lucrative price. They are currently saying that they have about 1.2 million honeybee colonies that they have purchased from beekeepers today. And the reason that this is such a big problem, we are currently going into what all of media is calling the biggest wealth transfer in our history, and that is because farmers, business owners, also commercial beekeepers are reaching the age where they're planning to retire. Maybe they don't have anybody to pass on their business down to, so they're looking to be able to sell out everything that they have and just retire and live the rest of their happy life. That is awesome and everything, except for when something like GeoCure comes along and they know exactly what's happening and they want to monopolize the market. That is exactly how I'm seeing this company. And if you look into it a little bit further, you'll notice that it seems to be a little sketch. So the website that they use, it's not like a .org or .us website. It is a website saying that it is a foreign website, not from the United States. It also, whenever you are to reach out to it, many beekeepers, including Charles Linder, has reached out and to try to get some responses from GeoCure. And whenever they respond, it sounds very AI-ish. Also, you can't even view their website without a password to see what they're all about. It all seems like one big old I don't even know what to call it. It's raising my red flags, that's for sure. And what would happen if they were to start buying out all of these big commercial operations is you would never be able to get into beekeeping again. They would completely monopolize the market. And so anybody who was ever wanting to build a beekeeping business, even be a beekeeper, it would then have so much red tape around it, you would just not even be able to do it. And that is why we need people like you and me to fight against what's going on with that. If you do want to learn more about GeoCure, there's also another article in the American Bee Journal. If you aren't subscribed to it yet, I definitely suggest subscribing to it because it has everything about beekeeping for a hobbyist, for a sideliner, for a commercial beekeeper. It has everything you want to know about what's going on in the industry, so you're kept up to date. Okay, so taking all of this into account, what's going on with honey, what's going on with our miticides, with the FDA, what's going on with GeoCure. I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist because I promise I am not prone to leaning that way, but I'm just looking at all the strings that are attached and where everything is just kind of laying out. And what it looks like to me is that beekeeping is in real trouble, and it is possible if we don't make a stand, then it could become monopolized and it could just be turned into another situation where it's just big ag, like what's happened to farmers with corn and soy. especially since all three of these things are putting a lot of stress on beekeepers and their operation in a world that the profits are already very, very small, leaving not much for the beekeeper to live on, also leaving the beekeeper experiencing a lot of stress and having to really kind of scratch their head with how to keep things going. And the more pressure that they're applying, honestly, the easier it is for a lot of people to just say, screw it, I don't care. And that's exactly what their plan is, in what I'm kind of seeing. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about this. Um, it just seems to be like all three of those things and the pressure that they're applying could definitely be working together. Okay, so we can't forget about, yes, the beekeeper, but also what about honeybee colonies? So honeybee colonies are actually doing better than they ever have in history. We currently have more honeybee colonies than, like I said, we have ever had in history. So all the media that you've probably been seeing that like we need to save the bees, that the bees are struggling, they're doing just fine. The only problem that we did have with honeybees was in 2006 through 2007. That's when colony collapse disorder, the term, was coined. And what that pretty much is that honeybee colonies were just randomly collapsing or disappearing, like absconding, leaving their hive without any actual reason for why that happened. Now, there's a lot of things that they've been looking into to figure out why this could be happening, and some of those could just be like pesticides, any of the varroa mites that they're experiencing, an immunodeficiency, the environmental factors that they're now facing today with less forage than they typically had. There are a lot of things that are contributing to this, with nothing really pinpointing to why it's actually happening. But the cool thing about the beekeeping industry is it is really just kind of banded together, and the ones that have truly had a passion for what they're doing, they stuck with it, and they have figured out a way to be able to keep making bees sustainably and keep their beekeeping operation going. That is why we are where we are today, now in 2024, where we have the most honeybee colonies in history. So I will say that is something we should definitely be patting ourselves on the back with. Okay, so what can you do to make a difference? Because I promise you and I can make a difference if you do put in the action to actually do so, if this is something that you care about and want to help change. So first, you could start by educating yourself on what fake honey is and how to spot it. And you can also help spread the word and spread more awareness to your friends and family and other people in your community. Feel free to share this video so they can help kind of understand what's going on and why beekeepers as a whole really need your help. It's not the honeybees, it's the beekeepers that need your help. Because like I said, remember what's happening to the farmers right now, to cattle ranchers, to dairy farmers, to corn and soy farmers, all of them, they are being squeezed and strangled almost so that there's a change in that. And honestly, in my opinion, some of our freedoms can be taken away. You can also support ethical and sustainable beekeepers. It is very easy to find a beekeeper in your area, and I guarantee you do have a beekeeper in your area that you probably don't know about. We are blessed to have something called Facebook today, where you can just throw up a post on there and find through the grapevine someone who has honey. So definitely do that. And instead of going to your grocery store and purchasing honey there, use your money to vote for you. Go up to your grocery store manager if you want to, and even tell them, hey, I'm not buying any of your guys' honey anymore because it is all fake. I want to support something that is local. I would love to see if you guys would do the same thing and start supporting American-made honey, not honey coming in from other countries. You can also send a letter to your legislation and speak about what you feel on this subject and how they should change the labeling requirements for honey, because that is the biggest thing. When I went through all of those bottles at Kroger, I saw that a lot of them did not even say where the honey was from. It would say product of the USA maybe on the front, but product of the USA or even just made in the USA does not say where it's from. It should say on the back of the bottle where the honey, what country that honey is from. If anything, I think it should start having an address or a state of where the honey was made. Or Here we go. I don't know if you guys buy olive oil often, but olive oil, I've noticed some of the bottles are starting to make this stand towards having a QR code on their bottle so that you can actually trace back to where the olive oil has came from. What about doing that for honey? That would be wonderful. A lot of people would love to be able to see where that honey came from. They can connect to the product more, and you are ensured that you are actually getting something that's real and not fake. So I just want to remind you that you can, in fact, make a difference, and it's going to depend on people like you and me to actually speak up and just flood everybody that we know, the Congress, to flood the grocery stores and spread as much awareness and say as much as we can about this so that people can chip in and we can really make a difference. So I hope this video kind of opened your eyes a little bit. If you guys have any questions or just have any thoughts, drop in the comments and we'll chat. All right, don't quit and be fit.